Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming along to listen tonight to David Pipe's talk, An Introduction to Conducting. So I think quite a few people might have been along to some of the EDA webinars previously. If you're using the Zoom app or the application on the desktop, you should be able to see a Q&A and a chat. And we'd very much encourage you to put in your thoughts or questions into the chat or question and answer session. I think David is going to very much play it by ear in terms of how those questions are best answered. They'll definitely be covered at some point, but whether they're covered during the talk is not quite certain. You might find it useful to have a pen and paper handy, just sort of back of the envelope type of stuff. There will be a couple of practical elements tonight, but in the meantime, I'd just very much like to welcome David Pipe, and I will hand over to him right now.
Thanks, Dave. And first, just to say what privilege it is and a pleasure to be here, and I hope that many of you will get plenty of benefit from tonight's session. I'll go through a few PowerPoint slides, but very much, although I'm going through them, if there's likely to be questions at various points, so feel free to use the chat facility on that, and we, time permitting, we'll certainly have some pauses. What I don't want to do is to lose anyone early on. So if you're struggling with anything, perhaps, as I say, use the chat, and we'll see where we get to, and hopefully there'll be time at the end as well to have a catch up and some more some questions about what we've been through. Right, I'm just trying to work out now how I don't want to share. I'm probably not sharing the screen I want to share. Right. Dave, can you see that?
I'm afraid that we've got the wrong bit. We've got the presenter's view rather than the slideshow.
Presenter's view of the slideshow.
Yeah, so we've got your current slide and the next slide showing on the screen at the moment.
All right. Okay. Bear with me on that. I'll tell you what. Let's start again.
Yeah, I think if you start the slideshow and then share, I think that'll.
Yeah, I'll try that. I'll try that. Okay. Possibly it's already okay. Okay, bear with me. Apologies for this. I'm going to close that down because it's fighting me. Right.
Yes, there we are.
Does that look any better at all?
That is perfect.
Right. Apologies for the hiccup. Hopefully now everyone can see. So yes, introduction to conducting. First of all, areas we'll cover tonight, which you can all see. Just to go briefly, what is conducting? how do calls work, calling my first touch, using coursing orders, and then we'll move on to longer touches and court appeals, and we'll have questions at the end. Now, I know I've just read out that first slide. I'll try not to do that with the rest. It won't be death by PowerPoint, but just to give you an idea of the agenda there. In terms of what is conducting, I suspect we could debate this for the whole hour, which we're not going to, but certainly it is more than just bobs and singles, and indeed a lot of conducting is done without any calls at all. And the question is, what makes a good conductor? And that's an interesting one as well, which I'm not going to debate long and hard. But essentially, conducting, I think, is about helping the touch to achieve its potential, and also being able to help get the ringers back on track as a conductor rather than a bob caller. I guess tonight, and we have to work out, the audience we're talking to, we're really going to start with calling the bobs, but this is potentially for some of you the start of a long journey, and so it's worth, I think, just talking about, where is the end on this, and really the answer is there is no end. Conducting is the end in itself for many, but where you get to, who knows, and very much that's up to the individual on that. So in terms of what is conducting about, I've mentioned here there's general help, and that can be as vague as lead end now, which can be exactly the right thing to say at the right time. People, especially in methods like plain bob, will be looking for the lead end, and when you say lead end now, it will help them to know, I need to be in 3/4 down, and they can get themselves to 3/4 down. So that can be a good example of general help. Specific help, of course, is to a particular bell. You are dodging 3/4 down and telling them that at the time. But whatever you do, it's good to make yourself clear in this. I think we all probably know conductors who might often waffle on and not really, and you can be left standing there and thinking, well, I'm not sure I quite heard that, or did he mean me, or what was she trying to say there? And so that one of the top tips, I think, in any conducting is if you have something specific to say, then certainly say it. If not, it's probably best left, because people are trying to concentrate on the ringing that they're doing. So conducting is very much about saying the right thing at the right time, and like I said earlier, that sort of thing can take a lifetime to master. And again, we could debate this for a long time. Tonight, I think we'll focus more on the calling of bobs and getting a start into conducting. So, looking at how calls work, I've selected plain bob minor as a basis really for all of the discussion tonight. Why plain bob minor? I think it's because it's a method that hopefully all of us will know. It's one of the simplest methods there is. It's very structured, and is something we can all relate to. Almost all the concepts I talk about extend to other methods as well. So although we're talking about plain bob minor, the theory is the same for whether it's treble dodging minor or major. Potentially slightly different when you get to things like Granzer and Stedman even, but that's possibly a topic for another day. So for tonight, it's going to be plain bob minor, I'm afraid, and everything everything we talk about will relate to that. So how do calls work? I say they are usually at the lead end. It is possible to have half lead calls or even more esoteric calls than that, but we'll focus on lead end calls. And referring to plain Bob minor, the plain lead will have no bells affected, and the place notation for the lead end is 1, 2, i.e. the treble's leading, and whichever bell is in seconds place at hand stroke stays in seconds place. So seconds is made, all the other bells cross, which in plain Bob minor means that they dodge. The Bob will usually affect 3 bells, and certainly in plain Bob minor, that's the case. Place notation for the Bob is 1, 4, so treble's leading in first place, and bell in 4th place at hand stroke will make 4th place at backstroke, making the Bob, and the bells in 2, 3 run in and run out, and the bells in 5, 6 dodge. So that has effectively affected the bells in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place. So that's 3 bells affected. And were we to call 3 Bobs in the same position on affecting the same 3 bells, after 3 Bobs, they would be back to where they started, and we call this a round block. Singles sound more complicated than Bobs, and people often think of them or worry about them, but actually they affect only 2 bells. The place notation of a single in plain Bob minor would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and this actually only affects the bells in 3, 4, because 1, 2 is the same as our plain lead anyway, and so those bells, the treble and the second, are unaffected by a single, but the bells in 3, 4 are affected. 1 makes thirds, 1 makes fourths. And of course, if you call 2 singles 1 course apart, you will get a 2 course touch, again, a round block on that. I'm hopefully starting fairly simple, and the aim is not to lose anyone, because I'm conscious we do potentially have a range of people out there, and I'm talking essentially to myself at the moment, since I can't hear feedback. So I'm hoping that although we're starting simple, we will get a bit more complicated as we go through. And continuing with the calls themselves, just in a bit of visual form, the plain lead, as we talked about, place notation, and here we see the last few rows of plain Bob minor, that this is the last few rows of a plain course of plain Bob minor. Just before it comes round, we have cross 1, 6 when lead and 6th is made, cross, and then 1, 2, and you can see there nice color coded. The second makes seconds, and the bells in 3, 4 are dodging. I've left the bells in 5, 6 blank because they're going to be unaffected whatever happens, whether it's Bob, single, or plain. So you can see visually that the plain lead seconds is made, and indeed the plain course comes round, back to rounds. Were you to call a Bob right at the end, then you can see that fourths is made, as we talked, 1, 4 in the place notation, and the bells in 2, 3 swap over. Therefore, we've now got the course end 1, 4, 2, 3, 5, 6, and I call it a course end because the 6th bell, the tenor, is at its home position. So that row 1, 4, 2, 3, 5, 6 is clearly not rounds, and were we to ring another Bob at home in a course time, then 1, 4, 2, 3, 5, 6 would become 1, 3, 4, 2, 5, 6. And another course after that would bring us back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So already we have a pretty simple touch, and we could call 3 Bobs every time that 5 and 6 are dodging at the back together at the lead end, and that would give us 3 course touch or 180 rows. Single, as we said, 1 and 2 do exactly the same as they do on a plain lead. The only difference is that 3 and 4 both make a place, so thirds is made and fourths is made. And again, that gives us a different course end, 1, 2, 4, 3, 5, 6. We only need to repeat that once and we would get 2 course touch, which would be 120 rows. Now the smart and alert among you will probably have clocked that you can of course ring combinations of bobs and singles, and indeed by calling just calling when 5 and 6 are in their home position, so when 5 and 6 are dodging at the back, it is possible to get a 6 course touch. That's the maximum number of courses you can get with 5, 6 staying coursing. And to do that, you could call 4 bobs and 2 singles. For instance, the 2 singles would just need to be 3 courses apart. So for instance, you could call bob, bob, single, bob, bob, single, and that would give us a 6 course touch. And I'll leave it as an exercise to the reader to write out the course ends to that if you want to. It's possible to get a 4 course touch as well. Bob, single, for instance, would work, or single, bob, single, bob. And again, you feel free to play around yourselves and write out that. But knowing these can, if for instance you're ringing on the Sunday morning and you've got 5 or 6 minutes or 7 minutes or 8 minutes or how many minutes, and someone says call us a touch up to time, if you have a rough idea how long 1 course takes to ring, then you can choose to either ring 1 course, plain, which would be a plain course, 2 courses is just 2 singles, 3 courses, 3 bobs, 4 courses, etc., etc. So it's very, very versatile. Right. Although we've talked about touches involving just homes, we're going to look specifically at a touch involving a bit more than just calls when the 5 and 6 are dodging together at the back. You've probably or hopefully all heard the terms wrong and home to describe the calling positions, and effectively wrong, these are all based on a fixed bell, and typically we would use the tenor as the fixed bell when calling, or the observation bell, should we say. So you're using the tenor as observation. The tenor would be in this touch anyway unaffected. Doesn't have to be unaffected throughout to be the observation bell. You can have the observation bell making bobs or running in, but in the touch I've selected, a nice simple touch, the observation bell, the tenor in this case, is going to be at the wrong position and the home position every time we make a call. And if I go through this picture here, you can see that the wrong position is when the tenor is in 5, 6 up, will be in 5th place at the lead end, and the home position is when the tenor will be in 6th place at the lead end. And these little dashes here, if you can see them, relate to the calling position, and the numbers written down are the lead ends. So we can see that we start with rounds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The wrong, the bob, is called at the first lead end, and that will give us the row 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 4. And possibly the first thing you notice is that actually 2 and 3, and the treble, of course, but 2 and 3 are returned to the same position that they were the previous lead end. So effectively, they run in and run out and repeat the lead. And that's quite a useful feature, certainly when we are conducting, and certainly I will use it when conducting playing Bob, to know that the same bells are going to run in, run out in multiple leads. But if we look at the end of the first course, where we get the home that gives 1, 4, 5, 2, 3, 6, we can see that actually the lead before that, 4 and 5, were seconds and thirds place bell, and the lead after as well. So for both the calls, they become seconds and thirds place bells. So that's sort of three lead ends in a row where 4 and 5 are fixed. And knowing that, again, is a bit of help for the conductor if you've spotted that in advance. And a lot of things actually, and I will certainly say, I'll probably say it more than once, but conducting, certainly in the early stages, is very much about preparation. And if you are calling a touch, I would thoroughly recommend writing it out, as I've done here, even if it's only pencil and paper, and looking through it. So we have our wrong and our home, and the first course brings 1, 4, 5, 2, 3, 6, and then the second course, the wrong and the home, brings us back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you can see throughout that the observation bell, effectively, which we've said is tenor, is going from starting at 6th place bell to 5th place bell. So 5, 6 up, 3, 4 up, make seconds, 3, 4 down, 5, 6 down. So the tenor just rings plain courses for this touch, but all the other inside bells are affected in some way or another. For instance, we can see that the 5th will make the first wrong, and then will run out at both the home and the second wrong, and then is unaffected at the final call at home. So that's a 2-course touch, and the touch length of that is 120 rows. And just as we discussed on the previous slide, what does wrong and home mean? I don't actually know, I confess. I think it's called wrong just because it's not right, and right would be the home position, and wrong is not the home position, but it refers to the position of the tenor or the observation bell, but which is usually the tenor. And so wrong is where the bell is in the n-1 position at the lead end, and the home is when obviously it is in its home position at the lead end. Crucially, at what point do we say bob or single? And I would certainly, or my recommendation is always to say it, and it's fairly specific, I would say, at the start of the backstroke before the lead end. So it's one whole pull before it needs to take effect. I would say at the start of that row rather than the end of the row, because if you leave it to the end of the row, it possibly starting to get a bit late. If people are about to pull off at handstroke and they have to do something different at backstroke, that's not really too much time to respond. Equally, if you were to say it at the handstroke before the backstroke, before the lead end, some bells might then think, oh, is this the lead end? Right, I can do that. So, and therefore they may try to make the bob in the position they're in, or run in, run out, or whatever. So by calling it right at the start of the backstroke, bells have already started to pull down at backstroke and to ring in the position that they need to, and this is the backstroke before the lead end. But the backstroke of the lead end that's the row that the bob takes effect, not the handstroke. and therefore by calling it at the beginning of the backstroke before gives them pretty much a whole pull to work out what they need to do. And finally, which bell should you ring if you're calling your first touch? And I think the answer is whichever you're comfortable with. And again, make sure you prepare thoroughly. Some of you might be happier or happiest ringing the observation bell, i.e. the tenor itself. That way you know to call a bob when you're about to dodge 5-6 up, and then call another bob when you're dodging 5-6 down, 5-6 up again, and 5-6 down, and that's hopefully fairly easy. Some of you may be confident enough to ring one of the working bells, in which case it's not a bad idea to actually think about a specific bell beforehand and perhaps plan to ring that bell and remember where you will be at various points, so you've got another point of reference, not just perhaps trying to follow the tenor. And some of you may feel that actually ringing the treble is the best thing for your first touch as conductor. It's certainly not a bad shout, because ringing in treble, of course, you don't have to worry about dodging or running in, running out, or whatever. You can then concentrate on making sure you can call the touch properly. And again, there's signposts that you might find for yourself. For instance, you may say, well, I know that when I'm coming down from the back, if I pass the tenor, sorry, in 3-4 on my way down, then the tenor will be dodging 5-6 up, i.e. at the wrong position. Or if I pass the tenor in coming down in 4-5, then the tenor is going to be dodging 5-6 down, which would be the home position. So you could use that as your cue to say, right, I know there's a bob coming up at this lead end. And as we discussed, the bells running in and running out will be the same bells that were seconds and thirds place bell at the previous lead end. So again, if you're on the treble, it's probably quite easy to spot which bells are the ones running in and running out. Obviously, the bell running out is the one that, as a treble, you take off at lead, and the bell running in obviously takes you off. And again, if that bell doesn't appear, if you've remembered it from the previous lead, you can remind them what they're meant to be doing. So again, it's all about preparation. I would have a good look at those figures, and just go back to these and just say it's certainly worth whatever you call, and this is only an example touch, but learn it and learn it well, and that will give you more confidence when you come to call it. In the extreme case, and I know when I have rung a fair bit of minor in hand myself, and if I'm calling it, I've learned the lead ends for every lead of an extent, and actually that is a bit of a foolproof way then of if anyone goes wrong, and you know what lead end is coming in up next, then it's easy enough to put that right. That's not necessarily for your first touch as conductor, but the point being, the more preparation you do, the more confident you can be then that you can steer things through the touch. So do have a good look at the numbers, whichever touch you decide to call first. Right, we'll move on. We'll have a little bit of a look at coursing order, and I guess the first thing to think or to ask ourselves is what actually what is coursing order, and then why would we use coursing order? But essentially, coursing order is simply the order in which the bells follow each other throughout the course. It's the order in which they course, and coursing is just following each other around. And no, plain Bob better than any method really to exemplify that. And you can see here I've written out the first lead of plain Bob minor, and I've highlighted the bells ringing in sixth place. I've started with the fifth, but you can start with any number. But if you look at the bells that lie behind, it goes from 5 to 3, 1, 2, 4, 6. So in this lead of plain Bob minor, the coursing order is 5, 3, 1, 2, 4, 6. And in fact, if you look at the bells on the front, effectively it's the same. It starts with 2, but 2, 4, 6, 5, 3, 1. And that's because everyone is playing hunting, everyone is following each other around, everyone is coursing, so to speak, and therefore the coursing order is very well defined. In other methods, it isn't always so well defined, but methods that have regular lead ends, all the bells will be coursing around the lead end itself. Now, although this is only the first lead of plain Bob minor, the working bells, by which I mean all the inside bells 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, will remain in that coursing order for an entire plain course, as long as we don't have any bobs or singles. The treble, however, because the treble is the only bell that doesn't dodge at the lead end, it plain hunts through every lead end. The treble moves through the coursing order. So in a different lead, you might find that the treble is between a different pair of bells. In the first lead, it's between 3 and 2. In the second lead, it would be between 5 and 3. So we'd get 5, 3, 5, 1, 3, 2, 4, 6. But when we define the coursing order, we tend to omit the treble, or we do omit the treble because the other bells are fixed. And if we look at it, so the bells, as we said, arrive in the order 5, 3, 2, 4, 6, which is what we saw. So that's what coursing order is. And how might it help me? Well, in plain Bob, it's extremely useful to know the coursing order, because essentially, and again, treble accepted, you always pass the bells in their coursing order. So here I've highlighted the tenor in green, and also highlighted the bells that the tenor itself is following. So again, you can see 5, 3, 1, 2, 4, and being the tenor itself, obviously it can't follow itself, but it is still part of the coursing order. And of course, whenever it gets to the front or the back, effectively that's its own place in the coursing order. So you can almost see it continue 5, 3, 1, 2, 4, 6, and then coming up the row 5, 3, 1, 2, 4, and again by the time it gets to the back, that whole lead has passed, and it's run through all the bells twice in their coursing order. And so if you've got enough brain power spare to be able to follow the coursing order, then that's a very useful way that if someone has gone wrong, if they're missing from the coursing order, you can confidently say that that's the bell that should be doing whatever it's doing, and ringing after you at a particular time, for instance, if that bell's missing. It's probably one of those things that is better to to watch it as you're ringing first rather than when you're calling. But as with everything, it's all about preparation. Now, if we move on to bobs and singles themselves, and we look at calls, how do they affect the coursing order? And whether we talk about coursing order or lead ends, as we've seen, bobs and singles have an effect on either 2 or 3 bells. Going back to the touch that we were talking about, wrong and home twice, the wrong affects the first 3 bells in the coursing order. And so if we have the coursing order 5, 3, 2, 4, 6, which is what we saw from the previous previous slide, sorry, then the first 3 bells, 5, 3, and 2, are swapped, and the new coursing order would be 3, 2, 5. 4 and 6 remain the same. A call at home, i.e. when the tenor is in 5, 6 down, will affect the middle 3 bells in the coursing order. So here we have 5, 3, 2, 4, 6. So the middle 3 bells, 3, 2, 4, will become 2, 4, 3. In each case, the order ABC has transposed into BCA. And in each case, the bell A is the bell that makes the bob and jumps to the back to C, to position C effectively, and it's bells B and C. B runs out and C is the bell that runs in, and that is always the case, and that's why possibly some conductors prefer to use coursing orders over lead ends. It's because the bells in the coursing order it doesn't matter what position the call is at, it's always the same transposition in terms of coursing order. So it's always ABC going to BCA. It's always the first bell in that sequence jumping to the end and making the bob, and the other 2 bells running out and running in. I will caveat that just by saying we're talking here about methods where seconds is made at the lead end. It's different if you've got far place lead ends. So if you're ringing, I don't know, a method with 1/6 at the lead end, 6 place at the lead end, and a 4th place bob would actually affect the bells in 4, 5, 6 rather than 2, 3, 4. But we're going to keep it simple for tonight, and we're just talking about plain bob minor, and this rule applies to calls in any position. It's always ABC becomes BCA in terms of the coursing order. Oh, and I missed the last little bit, which is an exercise for the reader, is to write out the rows following on from a wrong. So the first call that we had in our touch, the wrong gives us the lead end 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 4. And so anyone that has pencil and paper could quickly write out the rows of plain bob minor following that lead end, and you will hopefully be able to confirm that the coursing order is now 3, 2, 5, 4, 6, and you can do that by looking at the bells either at the front of the row or the back of the row. And actually now might be a reasonable time just to perhaps have a minute or so to think about that. And also, I don't know if anyone has got questions so far. I don't know from Dave whether you've seen anything come in or not.
Yeah, there've been a few questions. A couple of them were answered on the fly. So one went back to the example touches of plain bob minor, where there were, said Bob single, when 5, 6 were dodging together. And the question was, is that every lead? No, it's you know, there's obviously going to be 5 leads between calls in that case. I've actually just quickly written it out on CompLib, so put a link to that in the chat window, so that if people actually want to go and see where the calls come, they can actually go and look at the blue line, and obviously they're listed out next to the positions. And then there's a question about, you say when the bell is in n or n-1 place, is that for the hand stroke or the backstroke row? That's I've mangled the terminology, but it's the backstroke row that's important. Rebecca Harwin has just asked, how do you know where the start of the coursing order is? That's a very good question. What would you say for that, David?
Yeah, all good questions, I would say. I tend to start the coursing order after the observation bell. So in this case, tenor, the 6 is the observation bell. So the first bell in the coursing order it would be the bell after that, i.e. certainly in well, I say in plain Bob minor, at the start of any plain course of any method on 6, the coursing order is always 5, 3, 2, 4, 6, and that is starting with the bell after the tenor, if you like. So I always start on that. Perhaps it might explain it better. For instance, if we move up to plain Bob major, and we have obviously 8 bells, 7 working bells, and this time the observation bell would be number 8. The coursing order, I would start from 7. So on 8, it would be 7, 5, 3, 2, 4, 6, 8. Now, as you go up, say you ring 10 bells, it would be 9, 7, 5, 3, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, etc., etc. What tends to happen though is that calls usually will only affect the front bells, certainly in terms of normal peal compositions or quarter peal compositions, and so bells, for instance, in major 7 and 8 would typically be fixed, what people call tenors together, and certainly on 10 and 12 you'd probably find that 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 are all fixed. So when people write out coursing order, they actually tend to start from 5 anyway. So, and typically that's what I would do. So if I'm calling a composition on more than 6 bells, I would still actually start the coursing order from, I say from 5. In the plain course it's from 5, but if I've had calls, if a call are wrong, it becomes, the coursing order would become 3, 2, 5, 4, 6. And I would still say 3, 2, 5, 4, 6 on any number of bells. Even if we had 12 bells, I would say the coursing order is now 3, 2, 5, 4, 6, even though it's actually 11, 9, 7, 3, 2, 5, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. The fixed bells tend to get left out. And arguably you could say, well, I've included 6 in the coursing order here, as in 5, 3, 2, 4, 6, but I sort of think including those 5 bells is probably the minimum. So it's a bit waffling, a bit long-winded, but hopefully it's answered the question.
And there's just one more question, which is from Stephen Burr about spending time preparing to call a touch or quarter or peal is very important, as you've mentioned, but could you give us a rough idea of the amount of time that you might put in when preparing to call a challenging composition?
Yeah, as long as it takes, really, or as long as I have. I'm probably quite bad for leaving things to the last minute, but absolutely, one thing I would say is that the peals or the compositions where I've been able to prepare properly have been the ones where, you know, they've usually gone the best, and that's probably no surprise. Yeah, complicated compositions tend to be, I mean, it tends to be more spliced, where you've just got lots and lots of different methods to learn. So if you're changing method every lead, those are the ones that take a long time to learn. Ones that, if you like, you're just learning the calls, wrongs, middles, homes, and I know we haven't talked about middles yet, but just standard calls, it's, even though they might be relatively complicated, it's still not too difficult to learn those. And I suppose what I would say, because I tend to think again about coursing orders when I learn things, I almost try and learn it in context. So I won't just be trying to parrot fashion remember, oh, 2 wrongs, 3 middles, 2 homes, or whatever. I'm actually thinking about what those calls are doing, which bells are they affecting. And by doing that, actually, when you're then recalling it, it makes it much more real in terms of you having gone through it in your head. You get to a certain point, and I'm thinking, what do I need now? Do I need middles, wrongs, or homes? And then if you're thinking about what bells are affected, actually it sort of starts to fall into place, because it a bit like a jigsaw, it starts to fit together. You're thinking, yes, I know that I need the second running in here, or or this bell is going to make the bob here, or whatever. So I tend not to just learn the actual the calling positions. I tend to actually think about what it's doing, and I find that helps give a lot more context to it, and then inevitably makes it much more memorable. So it's quite a good trick, that. I mean, I could sometimes go through a peal of surprise major and learn it just in one run through, just reading it through once, slowly, but reading it through once, but thinking about what it's doing, and then able to recall the whole peal just from that, because of the context. So hopefully that answers that one. Thank you, Stephen.
Cool. Yeah, that's it. So I think that's it for questions for the time being, but do keep them coming in.
Excellent. Right, where did we get to? So we were talking about transposing coursing order, and we've got our touch again, wrong home. So and again, a little exercise for people. Hopefully you can work it out in your head. We keep talking about ABC becomes BCA, so that we know that when we call a wrong, it's going to affect the first 3 bells in the coursing order, which I've highlighted here, 5, 3, and 2, and it's going to put them from ABC become BCA. So 5, 3, 2 becomes 3, 2, 5, 4, 6, and indeed magically we can see that appear. The home, so once we're in 3, 2, 5, 4, 6, that remains the coursing order until another call is made. So by the time we get to the home position, we're still in 3, 2, 5, 4, 6, but we know that a home will affect the middle 3 bells in the pattern. So 3 and 6 are going to be fixed. 2, 5, 4, so ABC is going to become 5, 4, 2 BCA. So we can tell that will give us 3, 5, 4, 2, 6. And then we repeat. So we go back to a wrong, which affects the first 3 bells. 3, 5, 4 becomes 5, 4, 3. And guess what? The final home, 4, 3, 2, becomes 3, 2, 4. And look, we're back to where we started from. So that 2 calls touch, nice and simple, but we followed through, and the transposition in each case is the same. It's always ABC becomes BCA, and because we've only got 2 calling positions, that's fairly simple. And in all of them, obviously, the 6 is unaffected. This is our observation bell for this. Hopefully that's fairly clear to everyone. And it's worth pointing out or reminding ourselves, earlier we looked at the lead ends, and there was definitely some use in doing that, and you might find that actually you get more information from looking at the lead ends and perhaps knowing a bit about the lead ends than you do from the coursing order. We talked about 4 and 5 running in and running out. You can actually see here the first bob at home, you've got 254, yeah, and you can see that 254 becomes 542. So 5 and 4 are the bells running in and running out. And then the next bob at wrong, you can see 354 becomes 543. So again, 5 and 4 are the bells running in and running out. And we sort of saw that looking at the lead ends. It's very much a different way of thinking of it. And some people will be more at home with coursing orders, and some people will actually be more at home just looking at the lead ends themselves. And initially, of course, you might not have any spare capacity to look at any of that. Your main concentration is just about getting the bobs in the right place. So focus on that first. The touch won't come around unless you put the bobs in the right place. So that's the key bit. But perhaps, the second or third time you might call this touch, you start to see a bit more. And I think just knowing the various different ways of tackling it is perhaps giving you the tools, and then you find out for yourselves what works for you. And it's probably fair to say that actually on 6 bells, coursing order is potentially less relevant, but it becomes more relevant, certainly the more bells, certainly on 8, 10 and 12 bells, and very relevant, I would say, in terms of coursing order, because there's such a long time between lead ends. On 12 bells, you've got 48 rows in a lead of surprise maximus, whereas on 6 bells you've only got 12 rows between in plain bob minor between lead ends. So you might find that actually lead ends are a better way, but coursing order is definitely an important factor as you move up the numbers. Right, let's try and have a look at some longer touches and build up to a quarter peal even. So we've got our favorite touch, wrong and home twice, but if we miss out the final home, i.e. we just don't call the final home, it won't come round. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we'll get the course end 1, 3, 4, 2, 5, 6. So again, it's a rotation of those 3 bells, 2, 3, and 4. So just by calling wrong, home, wrong, forget the final home, wrong, home, wrong, gives us a two courses that doesn't come round, but we get 1, 3, 4, 2, 5, 6. So 5 and 6 are in their home position effectively, but 2, 3, and 4 are rotated. So guess what? If we ring wrong, home, wrong 3 times, as we know from right back at the beginning, it's a round block, and that will come round back to rounds. So the first time you call it, you get 1, 3, 4, 2, 5, 6. Call it again, you get 1, 4, 2, 3, 5, 6, and call it a third time, and you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that gives us 360 rows. And here are the lead ends from all 360 rows, which you may be able to see. And if not, I think Dave, you'll distribute this PowerPoint afterwards. I'm certainly very happy for people to have that, so you can look at it at your leisure. But you can see here, yeah, wrong, home, wrong, and then we have course end 1, 3, 4, 2, 5, 6, wrong, home, wrong. The next one 1, 4, 2, 3, 5, 6, and then wrong, home, wrong 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So these are all the lead ends with the calls. And I don't know if you can see, I've tried to put bold lines each time the tenor is in its home position. So after when it's in 6th place. So that has given us now a touch of 360 rows just by calling that same block wrong, home, wrong 3 times. If we want to generate a full extent, and on 6 bells the extent is 720 rows, we can simply, he says, repeat the calling, so wrong home wrong, but also insert 2 singles 300 at any lead ends 360 rows apart. Probably sounds a bit complicated, but if I show you what we've done here, so here is basically wrong home wrong 3 times, which is what we looked at 2 slides ago. But then you can hopefully see right at the end there, instead of letting it come round by calling a single, essentially 4 and 3 get swapped, so you get 1 2 4 3 5 6, and then if you repeat the whole lot again and again call a single right at the end, it comes back to 1 2 3 4 5 6. So those 2 singles are 360 rows apart. So wherever you call the single in the first column, as long as you call the single in the same position in the second column, it will be a true 720. The caveat is, you could, of course, well, you could call a single at any of the plain leads. You could also call a single at any of the bob leads, and it would still be exactly the same. It would generate a true extent. If you decide to call a single and it affects the tenor, bell number 6, then you've got to start watching the bell that you swapped it with. So the single always swaps 2 bells. So if you swap 6 and another bell, say 3, you then have to start using 3 as your observation bell, which could get a little bit complicated. So probably advice is not to do that. Keep it simple. I've put the single at the end here, so just at the end of 360 rows, just to stop it coming round, and then repeated right at the end of the 720, so you get a whole extent. So hopefully that's straightforward, and we've gone from a pretty simple touch wrong home, and from the basic or the basis of that, we've now generated a whole extent. And moving on, if we want a quarter peal, then you could ring 2 extents, and that's perfectly okay. And then that's the same calling. You call wrong home. You basically call wrong home wrong 6 times for 1 extent. So if you call it 12 times for 2 extents and put singles appropriately, then you'll get a quarter peal. But if we want to get more like an exact quarter, 1260 rows, for instance, we need a touch of 540. And guess what? My old favorite wrong home wrong comes back to help us again. So this time I've got wrong home wrong, but what I've done, or say what I've done, this is not my composition, it's a traditional one, is to insert a pair of singles 1 course apart. So it's wrong home wrong, and essentially the touch is wrong home wrong 3 times. So it's the same touch we've been talking about, but for each time you get to the end, you can call a pair of singles at home, so single home there and a single home a course later, and that just swaps 2 bells. In this case, instead of getting 1 3 4 2, we get those 2 bells, 2 and 4, swapped over, and then we swap them back 4 and 2. So this effectively adds another course onto this block. So wrong home wrong is a 2 course touch, and putting single home, instead of getting 1 3 4 2 5 6 at the second course end, which we normally would if we called wrong home wrong, we extend it by a course, and so we get 1 3 4 2 5 6 a course later, and actually calling that 3 times, because each course is 60 rows, so 3 courses is 180 rows, and 3 lots of that is 540 rows. So again, I chose it specifically wrong home wrong because I think it's such a versatile calling, and it's the basis of not just a short touch. It can be the basis of a half extent, a full extent, or even a quarter peel, with only very small sort of alterations, if you like, to extend as needed. So I know we've been through that fairly quickly, but hopefully it sort of makes sense. And once we've done that, once you've called your first quarter peel, of course, it's a case of what next. And as I've said here, usually it's dictated by your own circumstances. If you're at a 6 bell tower, well, yes, you're stuck with 6, but for those with 8 bell towers, it might be something on 8, and in fact you might not start with plain bob mine, you might start with something else. So I quite often look, and certainly if you go to ringing.org, there's plenty of compositions in standard methods there, and plain bob miner is no exception. And Dave, I know, was just looking at complib. That's a very good resource, but again, that's probably more specific, but equally good. There's plenty out there, certainly. For, you know, if you, well, just a quick search really should get you to anything useful. And yeah, and I mentioned treble dodgy miner there just because that's my own personal favorite. I've been ringing treble dodgy miner for, well, more years than I want to remember, and still never tire of it. It's one of the great challenges in ringing as far as I'm concerned, but one of the most satisfying things you can do. But that's my own personal view, and I won't I won't try and impose on everyone. So thank you for your time, and I hope you found it useful. And I'm sure there's a bit of time now for a few questions. I don't know, Dave, how we want to handle this, or if you've got any more already that people have been giving.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, there's one question waiting, but yeah, please do, if anyone has a question, please, now's a good time to type it in. I've got a couple that I'd like to just pop in using my privilege. So basically, I think one of the things that isn't really clear to me is, you know, how do I practice the skills that you've mentioned tonight? Because you know, I think it's a great walkthrough of the theory, but you know, I remember I attended a course like this 11 years ago, and it took me best part of 2 years to pluck up the courage to call anything. Have you got any advice for how I should go about taking my first steps into conducting?
It's a good question, and very much, you know, it does depend, doesn't it, on your own circumstance. I think it's certainly, it's one of those things that quite often conducting, people assume it's only a certain few people who ever do it or can do it, and therefore you probably find in some towers especially, it's always the same people calling things again and again, and it can feel quite difficult to make the breakthrough. Of course, if you don't ask, you don't get. But even when, I think it starts even before you say go yourself. Conducting is something that it's probably a good thing to try and watch others initially, and I guess people may already be doing that. But the benefit of that, of course, is you haven't got the pressure then yourself of you know, of being in the hot seat, but you can see, and things like the timing of calls, you see where other people call them and think, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And just even you know, looking at touches that other people call. it comes back to preparation, I guess, but it is also opportunity, and all I could say to people is, look, talk to people, talk to your own tower captain, but talk, and if you know, if you're not getting anywhere there, well, we're fortunate, we live in the UK here, where it's not too many miles to the next tower or the next branch or guild or whatever event, and yeah, just start making the right noises. It's difficult to know individual situations and circumstances, but I think where there's a will, there's a way is probably a good way to put it. And you know, if you're not getting anywhere, then reach out, because there are more resources, aren't there, these days?
Absolutely, and yeah, obviously people will get the email address in the follow-up that they should receive tomorrow night with a link to the slides in. But getting in contact with us at education@cambridgeringing.info is a good way of you know, just making contact with somebody in Cambridge. You know, if you've got something that you need to unlock in your local tower, not physically, obviously, I mean, current circumstances permitting, you know, but I think, yeah, Philip George does make the point that it is just all about practice, and you know, practicing transposing coursing orders and watching coursing orders. So I think that's yeah, that's a very valuable point. I think the second question that I had was, yeah, would you say, because it's very easy to fall into the trap of just calling the same touches over and over and over again, just because you know them and you can rely on them. What do you say about the sort of exploration versus exploitation aspect of calling short touches on practice night?
It's a good question. Again, I'm quite an advocate of actually just winging it, which again teaches you a bit of seat of the pants stuff. But with something like Plain Bob Minor, actually, it's and again, you know, I'm not saying this, you certainly shouldn't do it for your first touch or even your first few touches, but actually it's not that difficult, especially if you say restrict yourself to bobs only. If you might call some random bobs and you end up with, you know, lead ends you don't even recognize, and it's good to do this if you've got a stronger band. You don't really want to do it with weaker bands, but if you have got the stronger band, call some random bobs. Then how are you going to call it round? Well, first thing you might do is to try and get 5 and 6 back together, i.e. in the coursing order 6 5, so that they're following each other around. And once you've done that, then you should, by a combination of homes, you'll be able to get the touch round. If you're very clever, you'll work out as well that calling the tenor to run out and the fifth to run in, i.e. what we call a before, also doesn't, it still keeps those two bells coursing, and that effectively is a reverse home, if you see what I mean. So because the other three bells, instead of ABC to BCA, it is in fact ABC to CAB. I know we're starting to get a bit technical now, but the thing is, it's only by doing that, putting yourself in a bit of and what's the worst that will happen? Touch doesn't come round. You just get to a point, you say, stand, okay, we've had good fun. Didn't come round that time. Give it a go another time. But at least, you know, you've tried. So on 6 bells, that's a great thing to do. Plain Bob Major, it gets a bit more difficult if you're trying to wing that. You could spend a whole practice night trying to get that round. But yeah, there's on 6 bells, I think, you know, Bob doubles, Grancer, yeah, Bob Minor, just have fun. Just maybe get someone else to put some random calls in. Again, it's something that can be fun for the other person, because they don't need to know what they're doing. They just need to know where the lead end is. So get them to put some calls in, and then someone else, you or, you know, can take over and try and call it round.
And I think there's a penalty if they accidentally call it round, isn't there?
Yeah, well, exactly. You make your own rules in these things, but yeah, there's there's plenty of fun to be had, I think.
Yeah, Richard Pargeter says, yeah, just getting people in just to call plain courses and call changes is a good way of building confidence. I think that's very true, and it sort of breaks that mentality that only certain people can do the going and stopping.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, I've got the chat up now because it was
Right.
taking too much of my screen up before, so it's a bit difficult to see it while I was presenting. But yeah, absolutely. It's and call changes again is it's a more of a low stress way to get people into it, but you still have to start thinking, and it's not just thinking, it's actually looking as well, and by doing call changes and perhaps doing it rather than doing a prepared list of call changes, so we all know how to get to Queens possibly or whatever, just call some random ones and then again try and call it round, because it relies on you then having to work out, well, what order are the bells currently ringing in and what order do I want them to be ringing in, and how am I going to achieve that, and how am I doing that whilst ringing my own bell and perhaps thinking about other bells as well. So yeah, certainly all good routes into conducting, and the main thing is just have a go, or give people the opportunity, or let's encourage each other to to have a go on things like that.
Just going back a little bit, there was a question which said, can you just go over again, what do you mean when you say one course? So that would be, for example, one course between calls. So I think there's one level at which it's a very simple answer, and another level which it might be a little bit more complex answer.
Yeah. So in the plain Bob minor example, I'm constantly referring to the observation bell. So the tenor in our case, and bell number 6. So a course apart is, if, and typically it's either between wrongs and homes, it's going to be 5 leads in terms of plain Bob minor, but it's where that bell is back in its same position. So and the point, I guess, behind it is that if you're a course apart, then it's going to be the same group of 3 bells that will be affected. So right back at the beginning, we talked about bobs at home, or calls at the home position, i.e. when the tenor is dodging 5/6 down. They come every 5 leads. So it's 5 leads. If you ring 5 leads, that's a plain course. So if you do nothing, that's your one course, and it's come around. All bells come back to their starting position. If you call a bob, 3 of the bells don't. They sort of transpose. 5 and 6 do come back to their starting position. So another 5 leads, i.e. one whole course, that's then, if you have another call after those 5 leads, you are still affecting the same group of 3 bells that you did at the previous call. So yeah, a course apart is just basically ensuring that you only affect the same group of bells. But of course that's quite limiting, and although we discussed the options there, and you can call different length touches, you cannot, for instance, generate a whole extent just by having calls at home. Perhaps a slight diversion, but an interesting feature, and this is why the wrong home wrong block works as the basis for an extent. When you think about it, or if you analyze and look at it, there are 10 leads in that block. It's a 2-course block, and for 5 of those leads, 5 and 6 are coursing each other, i.e. they're in their home position for both bells, and for 5 of those leads, they are not coursing, i.e. they're I'm trying not to use I suppose terminology, but they're what I would call in the 3/4 position. Therefore, in terms of the coursing order, there's more than, they're not adjacent. That's what I mean. So if they're coursing each other, they will be adjacent in the coursing order. So 5, 3, 2, 4, 6, 6, 5, 3, 2, 4, they are adjacent, 5 and 6 in that sense. But once you call a wrong, it's 3, 2, 5, 4, 6. So 5 and 6 are not adjacent. So back to my point, of the 10 leads in that wrong home wrong block, 5 leads, 5 and 6 will be coursing, and for 5 leads, they will not be coursing. And actually that's enough. That's what you need to be able to generate the extent. So it's that combination of coursing and not coursing, and having it in equal amounts as well. If you look at any extent of plain Bob minor and you write out all the leads, you'll see that 5 and 6 will be coursing for half of them and not coursing for half. And same for any pair of bells, but we tend to refer to 5 and 6 or 6 because that's the observation bell.
Tim has written to say that it seems like a big ask to be asked to put people right as well as doing all of the calling. I don't know how you'd respond to that. I think certainly from my perspective, yeah, I think at Histon where I normally ring, it's sort of a we rely on the people to stay right, and that applies to the conductor as much as anyone. So yeah, I think definitely it's not the whole weight of the world on your shoulders as conductor, but yeah, I think yeah, what would your advice be?
It's back to preparation, isn't it? If, for instance, that touch wrong home, simple 2-course touch, but you can look at those, look at the lead ends again, look at the figures, look at the coursing orders, whichever, like I say, whichever appeals to you or you think you can relate to best. I mean, me myself, I do. I suppose I've rung so much minor, I just know the lead ends. So you know, I can sort of derive it from that, and you're never too far from lead end, and therefore know what's coming up. But you know, what you might do is, like I said at the time, perhaps look at the bells running in, running out, because it's going to be it's usually around the calls where things might go wrong. That's probably the most likely thing. People are generally okay. You know, I can do my 3-4 down, 5-6 down, 3 whatever. And so just having an idea, right? You know, I know that the 5, for instance, is going to make the first bob, that bob at wrong, and the good thing is 5. So although 6 is a fixed bell, when we think about the touch, we've said wrong home wrong 3 times. Actually, 5 is a semi-fixed bell. 2, 3, and 4 are the ones that really do the rotation. 5 will always make the first bob at wrong, and then will run out at the home and the wrong around the first course end, and then repeat, and so make the first bob and run out at both the other bobs. So that's something to hold on to or latch on to perhaps. And again, if you're just calling wrong home, it's only 2 courses, and you can pretty much try and remember as much as you can about it, and hopefully if anything does go wrong, you've then got the information. But it's tough, you know, and no one should expect to be able to do that first off. You don't be disheartened. It's not, it doesn't mean you can't do it if you struggle the first time or even the first 10 times. You just, this is about, you know, like I said at the beginning, conducting is, you never reach the end. It's a lifelong thing, and you know, it's only if you don't give up, you'll only know, or you'll only make progress if you don't give up on it. So yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, and Richard Pargeter says, the ability to put people right is effectively the inversion of your landmarks, as you said when you were introducing the coursing order. You know, it's the confidence to be able to turn things that you're expecting to see into advice for other people. So yeah, and I would say absolutely, it's a skill which develops over time. Absolutely, you know, if you think you can't do it, don't let that be a barrier to stopping trying. I think that's that just getting started is the important point.
Yeah, and do not be downhearted. It's, if it were easy, everyone would do it. Thing. So yeah, it's about just trying, and every time you'll learn something new. You know, every time people say, don't they, it's you learn more from your mistakes. So you know, have a go. You might find it goes well, okay, brilliant, but then next time you know, it doesn't go so well, so try and work out what went wrong and just address that for the time after.
Okay, well, I think that's about all. So I'd like to say thank you very much to David for taking the time to prepare tonight's talk. I hope people found it useful. And like I say, do get in touch with us, education@cambridgeringing.info, if you have any questions or you know, when we're back ringing, whether you need help to put some of what's been talked about tonight into practice. Further than that, we welcome Mark Davis next Tuesday to talk about composition, which is obviously quite a closely related topic. I don't know how many of you saw the ticker at the front of the video, but that was one of David's compositions that was scrolling past. And then the week after that, we're hoping to bring you something on judging striking. In addition, we've got the Saturday drop-in sessions for any questions. So if you've got any questions resulting from tonight, you can drop in on Saturday. Details on the Facebook page, or do get in touch with us. All right, well, thank you very much again, David, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.